Well, thank you very much for joining us for this afternoon session. Sorry to wrap the breakup rooms up quite abruptly, but there were some very interesting discussions in those, but unfortunately we have to move on. So this afternoon, we have another 2 plenary talks and set of panel discussions. So a lot more exciting content to come. So just for those of us joining us and that were not with us this morning, just to briefly recap, talks are being recorded and we will post those online as soon as possible. So in the background, we're rapidly trying to cut those down and upload them so they're ready to be seen. We're trying to work on it at the moment, but at the moment breakout rooms are not recorded, unfortunately. Please do post any questions you have in Discord or use the chat on Zoom. We really would appreciate any questions, and it's really great to have this interaction between people. So questions very much appreciated. Just to limit the amount of background noise, only chairs and speakers are unmuted, but please, if you put a question or raise your hand, we can unmute you. And as before, any technical issues or problems, Discord or send us an email. So just to briefly recap, we had day 1 yesterday, the recordings of which are online, really focusing on a lot on intelligence, contextual inference, what are the mechanisms for understanding, representing intelligence and how it arises. Today on the 25th, we'll have a quick recap briefly, but also looking more at the applied robotics, soft robotics, how can we apply this intelligence to create solutions. We follow on this afternoon, and then finally tomorrow morning we start again at 8:45. So please do join us then. And after we finish the short talks and panel discussion, we will actually have a kind of an open-ended discussion. So it would be really fantastic to join us then to help guide and direct the future of this community. And we'll also be trying to send out a questionnaire both today and tomorrow to really capture the opinions of this community so we can shape it going forwards. So as I mentioned this morning, we had a talk from Kohei. We have this afternoon a talk from Joanna Bryson, and then also Alison Okamura joining us from the US. So some more fantastic content. This morning we had 5 panel talks, and we'll follow that again in the same format with another 5 speakers from a range of disciplines and bring everyone together to have a discussion. So just briefly to recap on the talks we had this morning, we started off with the plenary from Kohei Nakajima, talking and presenting his work on physical reservoir computing and its relevance and the tie-in to embodied intelligence. So he presented this framework from reservoir computing, the capabilities and the challenges. I think his echo state he introduced, and how do we achieve systems that display this, and really using the octopus tentacle as a framework. But he also demonstrated how we can take this concept and this approach and demonstrate it in action with the quadruped robot. So using a silicon backbone, which is providing a spinal reservoir or spinal engine to perform some computation and enable control. Looking at wings of kind of passive or flapping structures as a reservoir, and using a sensorized wing to actually perform some classification of, I think, the environmental wind direction or such like. And also interesting, this transfer computation or sharing information between robots, in this case, octopus tentacles in water. So a lot to think about from that, and some very interesting concepts. And this was followed by our panel talks and discussions, and we had 5 of those. And I think the interesting thing was how these all tied in and looked at different interactions between robots and humans. In each of the talks, this interaction was key. So for example, in Dinah's talk, she introduced as humans are the environments for robots. So it's how can we make robots that can live within humans? Etienne Burdet's talk of human-robot sensor interactions. So how do they interact together through sensors? Kenji Suzuki, robots as humans. Can we move towards cyborg? Kanaku Harada, robots to model humans. Can we use it as a means of training humans if we have robots that imitate or replicate them? And this extends nicely to Peter Zhu's work on understanding human processes, for example, with his soft gut. And finally, also Darwin Liu's work to really move to a different scale from within the body or small to actually developing architectural systems to provide surfaces or affecting or communicating in some ways with humans through the environment or influencing the environment in which they live. So really interesting different takes on the relationship between robots and humans from an embodied perspective. Just to touch on a few more details, Dana Damian talked about her work on resilient soft robots, really highlighting that soft is great, but it's also vulnerable. So looking at soft robots inside their body, but also creating systems that are reactive or responsive to faults by utilizing change in shape or material properties. Etienne Burdett looking at this body adaptation to improve haptic sensing. So looking at sensory exchange and sensory augmentation between mechanical interaction between humans and robots. And then Kenji Suzuki posed this really nice question of what's the difference between a mechanical robot and a human body, or if we move towards a cyborg, introducing things like sense of urgency, agency, upper and lower body coordination. And also using some of these ideas to then say, how can we offer improvements to users, for example, a wheelchair user, to utilize passive dynamics to help them with their motion. And then the final three were Kanako Harada, looking at medical robotics and creating these physical twins or these mock-ups of humans to help for training of other humans. And these were eyes, vascular, brains, really incredible technologies, but also an interesting use of these technologies. And as I said, that nicely couples with Peter Zhu's work on digestion robotics. So in vitro simulation of food and drugs, how they're digested, how they are simulated. And then finally, we heard from Darwin Liu on this robotics for smart construction and living. This human robot interaction through both service, infrastructure, maintenance, through the environment. So it's, I think, a really nice different take on embodiment as well. So just a few more reminders before we go on. Again, we really do invite you all to submit, hopefully, to the proceedings that we will be sending out the formal announcement for very soon. There's been some really interesting and fantastic talks in the breakout room, so it'd be very nice to follow those up and to have contributions from you for this. We've also been asked to pass on an advertisement for Robosoft, which may be interesting for many of you, and this is happening in 2 weeks' time in Edinburgh, both online and in person. So please do consider looking into that if that could be interesting to you. We also have a in-person workshop following up from this event at that on the 4th, and please do talk to Arsen if you'd like any more details for that. So back to the schedule for today. We next have a talk from Joanna Bryson from the Hertie School of Governments in Germany, talking about social communication, the social communication of meaning to AI. And then we are followed again by these speakers.